Hello and welcome to the 39th episode of the Plug in Play podcast. I am your host, Henry, and this week we got some juicy gossip for you. This is the lead-in, by the way. I'm trying to reel you in, trying to hook you for the episode. We got the Krafton and Subnautica 2 drama that's been unfolding over the past few weeks. I'm going to break that down because there's apparently a lot to break down within that news story. And then Ubisoft has given the keys of all of their big franchises, Assassin's Creed, Rainbow Six, and Far Cry, over to Yves' son, the current CEO of Ubisoft's son. So, you know, is that a nepo baby? Did he deserve it? Well, we're going to delve into that a little bit. We're going to find out. And then for impressions, we have a very interesting one. It's just No More Heroes. And when I say No More Heroes, I mean No More Heroes 2 and 3 will be the impressions for this week. We just came off hot of No More Heroes 1 in the last couple episodes. Really enjoyed it and finally had a chance to get to the other two. And we're going to see if the long wait of 11 years was worth it. You know, did No More Heroes 2 improve? Did No More Heroes 3 fall in its face? Maybe it's even better. We're going to find out. Stick around for the impressions, ladies and gentlemen. But before we get into that, I have a few calls of action for you. You may have heard of these before. You can like the episode, share it with a friend, you know, listen to it on any platform. Give us a nice review on Spotify, Apple, Podcast Addict. I mean, you can literally listen to it on your Alexa if you literally wanted to, literally. And, you know, like, you can also send in an email, you know, a question, maybe just be a part of the show. You can literally, I'm really into the word literally today, be a part of the show. Send us in a question, comment, concern to the Plug in Play podcast email at pluginplaypodcast1@gmail.com. Was that long enough for you? I'm going to not belabor the point. We're going to get right into it because I said literally too many times there. I'm trying to make it up to you. Krafton and Subnautica 2 drama. And when I say drama, I mean this is really drama. News this week has been a little light. It has been a little dry in terms of news. I really love focusing on the news. I love delving into the business aspects of things, how things work behind the scenes in the industry. It's obviously really fun to just point out and talk about video games, but I think understanding the mechanisms of how the industry works and why we even get the things we do is fascinating. And you really can't do that without kind of talking about the relationships between publishers and developers a little bit, because they're very integral to how a lot of big budget games get produced. In this instance, we have Krafton, which you may be thinking, like, who the heck is Krafton? Krafton is a South Korean publisher who you would best know, in fact, you would probably only know from PUBG, or PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, that game that came up with the Battle Royale formula and then, like, completely seceded it to, you know, Fortnite. But they kind of formed their own publishing brand and tried to make, like, a united universe of sorts. Callisto Protocol, you may remember, that was also published by Krafton. Did not obviously do very well. I think Callisto Protocol was actually initially intended to be like a in-universe PUBG game, and they were like, okay, yeah, we shouldn't do that, and pulled back on that at the last second. But anyway, Krafton, that's who they are. They bought Unknown Worlds, and which is the developer of Subnautica, which is a very popular, in fact, I didn't realize this, people were looking forward to it this much, but the second most wishlisted game on Steam currently. If you don't know, Subnautica is like an underwater crafting game. It's honestly like one of the few crafting games I've ever even close to be, like, have been interested in, because it, like, also has, like, a single-player campaign that kind of goes along with it, and kind of actually incentivizes the player to do, like, crafty things, which is, like, one of my big like turnoffs for crafting games is like, why am I even doing this? Well, just to make a house. That's literally the only reason you have to be existing in this game. And it's like, okay, well, that sounds kind of boring. And Subnautica kind of fixed that issue, and I'm really surprised a lot of other crafting games haven't really addressed that in some way, shape, or form. I do appreciate when those issues are addressed, but I guess most crafting game players, like, people won't stop playing freaking crafting games. So, we're going to get a million of them, and they're never going to change because people continue to buy them. But Subnautica is one of, like, the more respected ones, at least in my personal opinion. But they put out their expansion a few years ago for that game. I believe it was Below Zero was the name of the expansion. And they were acquired for $500 million by Krafton. I guess to kind of fast forward a little bit, these two have been in a bit of a spat recently. They've been at each other's throats and trying to sue each other over Subnautica 2. These guys fired the leadership of the Subnautica team, or Unknown Worlds, and essentially forced the game to be delayed into 2026. Catch for that is that in doing so, they had promised a $250 million bonus to the studio if the game was actually meeting that milestone of being released in 2025. So by forcing the game to be pushed to 2026, you could argue that there's a financial incentive there, and that maybe they kind of did it to save money and to screw over the development studio. And who's to say that's the case? Well, we're going to break it down. It's really been unraveling over the past couple weeks. And it was honestly kind of overwhelming for me, even the guy who kind of watched and follows the news, because like I would hear people talking about it and it'd be like, something new happened. Okay, something else has happened over the course of time that this has been going on. And fortunately, there was a gamingindustry.biz, great site that I also use. I primarily focus on VGC. They kind of hit the high notes of video game news that I care about. But gamingindustry.biz is also a great website that really delves into the nitty-gritty of stuff, and is a very good read if you ever get the chance, if you care about the stuff like I do. But they have a really great breakdown article of like day by day. Here's what happened in the Krafton Unknown Worlds drama. As time goes on, these two get a lot more catty, with Krafton being a real snooty little baby, if I do say so myself. I'm going to break it down for you here and go through it all and kind of explain what the frick is even happening, because it is honestly a lot to keep up with. So like I said, we're going to roll back. 2021, Krafton buys Unknown Worlds for $500 million with the little, carrot on the stick of $250 million if they meet certain milestones for specifically developing Subnautica 2. So even when this studio was bought, it was very obvious, like, okay, we really only give a frick about Subnautica 2. We're going to let you guys do whatever you want, but like we need that game eventually because that's literally the reason we're buying you. So $250 million if Subnautica 2 comes out in early access in 2025. So 2022 to 2024, not Krafton, Unknown World says, hey, we're not really going to be working on Subnautica 2. We're going to work on a new project. It's going to be called Moonbreaker. So they developed it through 2022 to 2024, and it flops. It's a massive failure. Commercially, critically, pretty much everything around the game is pretty much panned. And they're like, okay, Moonbreaker, not cool. We're moving back to Subnautica 2. I just say that because we have a long timeline here, and it's very obvious that like this failure kind of made Krafton a little bit upset that they had bought this studio that immediately produced a failure and wasn't working on Subnautica 2. So, but I'm sure that they had probably talked about that prior, because the deadline of 2025 for Subnautica 2 is like kind of silly if they already knew that they were going to be developing another game. But anyway, moving on to July of this year. So this is pretty much when everything kind of hits the fan, right? Krafton fires pretty much all of the main executive leadership, 4 big dudes at the top of the food chain for Unknown Worlds, and replaces them with the dude who's in charge of the Callisto Protocol studio. I'm not going to get into names because you don't give a frick about them, but that's the essential kind of, bullet points here. So now they've been replaced. Shortly after, like literally a day or two later, the game is now delayed until, specifically the early access launch of Subnautica 2 is delayed to 2026. This, in effect, makes the $250 million that the studio was promised completely null and void. They will not be getting that bonus anymore. Well, of course, Krafton comes out and says, hey, this has nothing to do with the money. This was a decision we were already kind of considering well before, we had done community playtests and had feedback that the game was not up to the quality standards that we were really trying to meet for this game, and we really just think it would be better if we just push it back until 2026, and maybe also, maybe the consequence of that is saving $250 million, but, that's just, what we have to do for the community. And hey, I really appreciate that as a member of the community. So that doesn't look good, right? It just does not look fantastic. Like maybe they kind of just screwed over a bunch of people out of $250 million. Once that occurs, Bloomberg starts writing about it. So Jason Schreier comes to the helm and he says, hey, maybe they did this for $250 million financial incentive. That could probably be kind of effed up. And in response, Krafton, weirdly, so this is where Krafton does a lot of stuff that starts doing stuff that is just like, what the frick, who is running Krafton? Because this is really odd. You don't, if I saw EA doing this, or Ubisoft, or, I don't know, frickin' Activision, Take-Two, whoever the frick, if they started doing this, I'd be like, what the frick, who, this is run by some really weird people who clearly have very little emotional control and aren't really thinking very business savvy, because when was the last time you heard any of the people that I just mentioned make a public statement outside of telling investors that things are going great? When have they ever commented on anything? Freaking never, because it's typically a bad idea. You don't want to actually comment on things because it's normally not going to do you any favors. It's going to typically be a bad thing, not a good thing. Well, here Krafton starts feeling a little bit attacked. They feel like people are coming after him. Okay, hey, we didn't do anything wrong. We did the best we could, and you're all coming out here saying we're trying to save $250 million. Shame on you. That's not cool. Well, they start going aggro, and they put out a public statement addressing this situation. But not only are they addressing the situation, they just straight up call out the previous leadership. So the headlining tag, like the title of the post that they make for this is inevitable leadership change driven by project abandonment despite holding 90% of earnout for themselves. I'll let that sit for a second. Holy frick. Like, how catty can you be? So they essentially accuse all the leadership of abandoning Subnautica 2, which already sounds kind of crazy. And then they say, hey, 90% of the payout was going to go to the leadership anyway. So, like, you shouldn't, if anybody's, should be called out, it's these guys for being greedy and, hoarding this massive payout that we were going to give them, which is just weird to one, make a real personal attack here, and two, be like, well, it's their fault for wanting the money that we promised them. Okay, I guess. Yeah, that's not very cool of them to hoard 90% of it and to, only give $25 million to, the rest of the studio, but it is what it is, that's the deal that you made with them. So, I guess that is what it is. But anyway, some other choice quotes that I pull from this particular post is, quote, however, Regrettably, the former leadership abandoned the responsibilities and entrusted to them. Subnautica 2 was originally planned for early access launch in early 2024, but the timeline had been since significantly delayed. Krafton made multiple requests to Charlie and Max, which are the two executive leaderships, two of the people who were let go prior mentioned, but to resume their roles as game director and technical director, but respectively both declined to do so. So they're saying, oh, hey, well, we even asked these mother effers to start working on the dang game, and they didn't frickin' do it. So we kind of expected that of them, and they frickin' didn't, so that's why we fired them. Another big quote here that I think is definitely worth mentioning, quote, in particular, following the failure of Moonbreaker, Krafton asked Charlie to devote himself to the development of Subnautica 2. However, instead of participating in the game development, he chose to focus on a personal film project. So again, kind of just throwing it out there, just being like, okay, well, F Charlie. Like this guy definitely didn't, like he didn't even, he literally wasn't even working on the game. So it's like, wow, okay, this is very catty, very direct, and kind of personal in a way that you definitely don't ever see publishers coming out and speaking. On a side note, they aren't wrong on any of this, actually. So, like as time has gone on, we've kind of learned a little bit more about this from both perspectives. And hey, yeah, so they were actually the main executives that were fired were going to be given 90% of the payout. Okay, that was something that's confirmed at this point. However, they came out and they said, hey, yeah, we were going to get 90% of it, but we were going to share it. Like we were going to spread it amongst the team, which I don't know, that just sounds suspect. Like why did you have a clause in the contract in the first place that you were going to get 90% of the bonus of $250 million if you just were going to share it evenly? Like why not just put that in the contract? Why, like that doesn't make any sense. So I already raised an eyebrow at that of like, yeah, I wasn't going to keep several million dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars for myself. I was going to share it. Like, I don't know. Like, it sounds like you were going to share the $25 million that was already allotted to the team if they met that particular bonus. So I don't particularly understand that. Another thing is people were digging and they went and Charlie, so the guy that they accused of like abandoning the game to work on films, was like, hey, I'm going to make a podcast. And so people were digging, found his podcast, and even in his podcast, he specifically says, oh yeah, I've completely walked away from game development to focus on my films, which he's making like a bunch of garbage AI films. Like literally he's just using AI to make like slop films. And he was like, yeah, I've actually decided to step away from games for a while I focus on my film projects. And it's like, oh, well, that's funny because clearly you were contractually obligated to work on Subnautica 2. So, like, to put it bluntly, yeah, like, everything Krafton is saying is accurate. And, like, there's definitely some people on the Subnautica 2 side that definitely did some things they shouldn't have. So, like, Krafton being upset with them is kind of understandable to an extent. But like it's still really weird for Krafton to make this public statement lambasting the previous leadership and kind of addressing them in a personal manner and saying that they're kind of douchebags, and like that just makes Krafton look like they're emotionally responding to the situation, which is not a good look at all for a very business-minded like publisher. Like you just don't want to see that. So moving on, a few days later, some internal documents from Subnautica 2 development leak on Reddit. This one I had not heard of before, and I was like, are you for frickin' real? So essentially what happened is some slides from an internal deck, a presentation at the company, were leaked. And when I say slides, I mean like a couple, like not much. There was obviously a full slideshow that was shown to the company at some point, the developers. I'm not exactly sure who the audience for this particular slide deck was, but you had, 2 of those slides leaked on Reddit, right? So the vast majority of the context removed from this particular bit of information, but the information essentially says, hey, we're looking at the content right now. Some of it doesn't look like it's really up to snuff. We're really not meeting the goals that we really thought we were going to in this amount of time. We might have to push back the game into 2026, which, I think it's specifically kind of like, hey, this release date we're trying to hit could possibly be in jeopardy if we want to meet all of our target goals. Not specifically saying, hey, there's no way we can do this. Hey, we may have to completely push it back, or it is a definitive possibility we have to push it back. It's maybe, something to consider. And, none of the rest of the slideshow is shown, so we don't have any information on if this is maybe somewhere else in the slideshow is everything else is coming along great, so we don't know. We have very little context here. And the reason I say that is because, funny enough, Krafton comes out and makes a public statement addressing these leaked documents, these leaked company documents on Reddit, and says, hey, just an FYI, those documents are legit. We can cooperate. Those leaked documents, yeah, we do have an employee that for some reason leaked 2 slideshow slides that stated that we're right. And, we can definitely agree that we are right. And, we wanted to be totally transparent in communication and make sure that, everybody understands, this is true. And I'm like, what the frick? That is so, again, such a weird move for a company to come out and say, yes, we have a leaker and what they've leaked is true. What the frick? No one is ever going to do that. The only reason you do that is if perhaps, maybe, that guy who leaked that stuff is you. And you intentionally leaked these documents so that everybody's like, hey, that's true. Now there's proof that Krafton is right. And it's like, bro, this is too suspect. It is way too suspect. I think it's a little too on the nose. A little too on the nose for me to be 100%. I think Krafton obviously leaked these freaking slideshow slides and then immediately put out a statement saying they were true because they wanted to look like they were right. Kind of ridiculous. In the meantime, we have the founders of Unknown Worlds. Excuse me, I keep forgetting their name. I just remember them as the Subnautica 2 developer. Unknown Worlds comes out and they say, hey, we're suing. We're going to sue $250 million on the line. We are suing, baby. Gear up, buckle up, baby, because we're coming in with our lawyer pants on. And very shortly after, Krafton backs down, and they say, hey, just FYI, look, we thought about it, and we thought it was wrong to hold us that $250 million away from the people who had worked so hard on this game. We've moved the bonus period to 2026, okay? So even though the early access is probably coming out 2026, don't worry, they're still going to get their bonus if they meet that target because we're really cool, okay? Krafton, hey, we're really cool out here. And it's just head-scratching. Just the behavior from Krafton is incredibly head-scratching here. A couple of days later, the lawsuit that was filed against them is kind of opened up, and we kind of start to see the perspective of the previous owners. So they state, hey, we think Krafton is, guess what, trying to get this game to release in 2026, and they specifically tried to pressure us into pushing the game into 2026 by like holding back resources, like marketing, which if you didn't know, publishers are typically like 100% normally responsible for marketing the games that, you know, are produced by, you know, them as a publisher. So like that is a huge hit to the game if they don't do that. So they were like, well, we're not going to freaking do that if you don't push the game into 2026 because you're not meeting the goals that we want, which again is kind of shady. And then they're like, okay, and contractually we weren't allowed to be fired, so like they kind of illegally fired us, so that's not cool either. And we also, like, the movie that they were talking about, that is like the movie they told us to make, which if you go and you look at this guy's podcast and like the stuff he had been working on, he clearly had been working on other things other than a freaking Subnautica movie. He had been working on a Christmas movie. So unless, you know, like, I think it was called like Mistletoe Misfits or something like that. So clearly had nothing to do with Subnautica at all. And like you can look and find the posters for this stuff, and it's like an elf and like a white woman like chilling in the North Pole or something like that. So like it is not about freaking Subnautica or at all. And so, you know, like this whole like, well, they encouraged us to step away and take away. Like that's the one thing I can easily be like, maybe they did, but like you clearly took that a little too far and kind of overstepped your boundaries with that and started working on other bullcrap that was clearly not what Krafton wanted you to work on. So that, not a very good defense here. And that's kind of where we leave off, right? We kind of see a little bit of both sides here, and we kind of see, you know, like a lot of what Krafton has to say, because Krafton's been a lot more public in their statements. But let's be frank here, everyone kind of looks kind of stupid, okay? A lot of the reporting, and it's funny when you do in like the digging that I've done, and you find like this guy's podcast and like how he's talking about like actively stepping away from the game to work on like a Mistletoe Misfits movie, like with AI slop. Like obviously this guy did not do what he was supposed to be doing for Krafton. It's very obvious that Krafton's pissed off at these guys because they bought them and they immediately made a flop of a game. And then like they try to make them make the game that they literally bought the studio for, put almost $1 billion on the line for, and then these guys aren't even really wanting to work on it. And they're like, okay, well, this is not very good. It's not what we paid for, and like, if you're not going to do it, we're going to find somebody who frickin' will, and they fired them. And like, honestly, I kind of understand that. At the same time, Krafton has done a lot of things clearly that look really shady and look really emotional, and like it is really poorly managed. And, you know, like the $250 million, I'm not going to come out and say directly, oh yeah, dude, they were 100% just trying to save $250 million. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me based on how they've been acting. They've been acting really suspect, and like all this other stuff is really ridiculous. That they like the leaked documents on Reddit is like so transparent and ridiculous. It's like, what the frick are you doing? But like, I mean, nobody here looks good. What I have noticed is that the reporting for this has been incredibly one-sided. You know, like all I ever hear about is like, well, Krafton is trying to save $250 million and like not give it to these people who've been working really hard on this game. And it's like, well, I mean, if you legit dig through and find like look at all these people and what they've specifically this Charlie guy, dude, I think he's I mean, like, I think it's pretty transparent he's in the wrong here. He obviously he has admitted to stepping away to work on stuff that he wasn't supposed to be doing at all, where this game without leadership could have possibly not been making its deadlines, could have possibly not been meeting the quality standards that Krafton was looking for when producing a game that they literally bought the studio for. Like, it's entirely possible that is a situation that could have occurred, right? So, like, I see a lot of reporting that's only targeting Krafton, only making Krafton look like the bad guy, and a lot of the stuff that maybe makes Unknown Worlds look bad is being omitted, or not really being mentioned. And, I don't love that, but that is understandable. A lot of the journalism in the gaming industry is kind of geared toward... I mean, if you look at Jason Schreier, I have a love-hate relationship with Jason Schreier. I'm not even going to say love-hate. I'm going to say I really appreciate Jason Schreier's reporting. If you don't know Jason Schreier, he's basically like the video game journalist guy. He basically breaks 90% of the big stories in the gaming industry. He's a big Bloomberg reporter now under the Bloomberg branch, or, publisher, whatever you want to call him. And he's clearly got a very political bent and a very specific kind of narrative that he tries to paint for a lot of what he writes about. You'll see a lot him pushing for unions, which I don't think is his place as a journalist, to be like, hey, everybody should be in a union. I think you should be telling me the facts of the situation. And, I've read several of Jason Schreier's books, and I've, read a lot of his articles, and I've heard him speak quite a few times, too, he does a lot of podcasts and stuff like that. And, he definitely has a bent to him and a story and a narrative that he's trying to portray. And while I do think a lot of what he does is straight, hard fact journalism, a lot of it is bent. And a lot of this, or has a narrative bent to it. And, a lot of this reporting around this particular situation has been coming from Jason Schreier, and I mean, he's very anti-big business is essentially what that means. When you're pro-union, you're anti-big business is typically what that means. And in this case, he's fighting for the little guy, he's fighting for the developer, and he's trying to paint Krafton to look like the worst possible thing they can be. Not that Krafton needs a lot of help with that. They're clearly effed up. They're clearly not very great people. Yeah, they probably deserve to be thrown around a little bit because they're doing a lot of freaking stupid stuff. But, at the same time, this developer is not free of sin. They have definitely made mistakes. They've definitely done things that they shouldn't have. And, nobody seems to be reporting on that aspect of it. And, in my opinion, looking at this for what it is, having all the facts I have at my disposal currently, I think both of these people made some really bad decisions and some really public decisions that they probably shouldn't have. If I had to side with anyone at the moment, it's Unknown Worlds. Krafton is certainly no angel and has a lot going against them in this particular situation. But I do think they clearly were a little bit more aggressive than they needed to be here. And it doesn't make me like them. So if I had to choose somebody to side with, it would be them. But at the end of the day, this is just a bunch of back and forth catty gossip. Nothing really comes of this. This isn't a really big deal. Subnautica 2 is still going to come out. As a gamer, this doesn't really affect you in any way, shape, or form. Krafton is a pretty small publisher, all things considered. So this is really just the headlines here is dang, these guys are really duking it out, and for whatever reason, these guys are really, really, not holding back punches here. And it's just something you don't see very often within this industry. So it's a long, long story, right? But hopefully you at least understand it now. I mean, right? You have the facts. I've given you the facts, and maybe you can make your own decision. But it's definitely a fun story to monitor, even though there's so much bullcrap. There's even stuff that I left out that I was that was stuff that was making headlines, because again, this has been a pretty slow news week. So like any other week, this probably would have slipped through the cracks. But like in this instance, it's grade A news drama, baby. So great for a little podcast, 30 minutes of me talking about Krafton. But anyway, next up. This one I don't think got a lot of attention, but I do think it is, especially in all honesty, I probably wouldn't have talked about this if it wasn't a very slow news week. But I do think this is important, and I do think it's interesting to kind of delve into here a little bit. But Ubisoft has appointed a new CEO to their unnamed subsidiary company. So let's rewind a little bit, okay? Past few months, really past couple of years, Ubisoft has really been struggling. We've reported on it. I keep saying reported, but we talked about it a lot on this podcast. Whether it be Star Wars Outlaws completely flopping. What is it? The Finals, I think. What was their freaking online first-person shooter? I've talked about it on the podcast a couple of times before. Even Alexis had played it. But it completely flopped. And that was after they were like, oh, no, it's doing great. And then they shuttered it like a month later or something like that. But like they've had a lot of games not succeed. Pretty much everybody was assuming this was 100% like Assassin's Creed Shadows was like the only thing going to possibly save them in kind of a death throw for them. They decided to split the company up into two different entities because they needed money from Tencent, but they didn't want to give Tencent enough of a share to remove power from the Guillemot family, which, if you didn't know, the Guillemots, Yves is the CEO. Yves Guillemot is the CEO of Ubisoft proper, the big daddy Ubisoft, right? Now you have to kind of distinguish because we have a subsidiary company within Ubisoft that's handling all the big IP. But they split it up so that, Tencent could give them a lot of money, but they didn't want to give up, power. Because Ubisoft is a family-owned company. The largest shareholder, the largest individual shareholder of Ubisoft is the Guillemot family themselves. And there's several Guillemots that work within the company, and we're going to get to that in a second. It's even more relevant. But they didn't ever want to really give up power, and that was a really big sticking point with the negotiations with a lot of people they were trying to get money from to help the company stay afloat. Is like, well, sure, we would love your money, but we can't give you that much shares because then it will take away, commanding power from the Guillemots. So that was a big problem. So what they did was they said, okay, well, we're going to take all the IP that people want to invest in, and we're going to put it into a subsidiary that we own fully, and then they can put money into that subsidiary, and they can have, controlling power of that, but we still have controlling power over the subsidiary, and so on and so forth. So it is what it is. Or you get money from those big IP. But anyways, those big IP, we still don't have a name for that company, but those big IP are Assassin's Creed, Rainbow Six, and Far Cry. Those are apparently what Ubisoft considers to be the big money makers of Ubisoft, which is, I would probably agree with that. So, moving on. Now we need people to run that company. So we just so happen to have two guys. So what's been reported largely is that Charlie's son, Yves' son, Charlie Guillemot, was made CEO of this particular subsidiary. That's not wrong. It's true, but he's co-CEO. So there's another guy running this company alongside him, and we'll get into it in a second, but I think that is likely for the best. So Charlie Guillemot and Christophe Derenez, hopefully pronounce that correctly, were named the co-CEOs of the new Ubisoft subsidiary. So Christophe, we'll start with him because it makes a lot more sense to start with him. I think because the bulk of this is about Charlie, right? Because basically people were like, well, obviously this is a nepotism hire just because he has, a Guillemot name. And I was like, okay, well, let's delve into this a little bit more. Maybe not. Who knows? I am a personal believer that the sins of the father are not a sin of the son as well, right? You are not what your father is. You are your own individual being. You do not inherit what, your ancestors gave you in terms of who you are, right? So that's what I believe. Could be wrong. We can have a philosophical conversation about it. But, it is what it is. So, just because this guy's dad is the CEO of Ubisoft doesn't mean, he's not a fairly capable guy himself and hasn't proven himself over the many years of his long, illustrious career, right? But anyway, we'll get into that in a second. Christophe was the former head of the Montreal studio, which, if you don't know the Montreal studio, it's basically the head development studio for every Ubisoft game you've ever heard of. It is an incredibly successful studio. It is basically their crown jewel, like the Montreal studio. So he was the head of that. And then he went on to be Ubisoft's managing director of North America. So this guy's a pretty big wig. He has clearly demonstrated he has, the ability to lead in a very large, capacity, ruling over all of North America. And he has the ability to produce results because he has made, he was the head of the studio for what has produced most of what has made Ubisoft successful in the first place. He's a very obvious pick, I would say. Looking at that, I'm not surprised at all to hear he was chosen as a CEO for this particular subsidiary, right? Charlie. Okay. A lot of Charlies on this podcast, actually. I didn't realize that. Both the news is all about Charlie. But Charlie is Yves' son, the current CEO of Ubisoft. And he previously worked at a Ubisoft-owned mobile studio, Alliant. Or he led the studio. He didn't work there. I should clarify, he led the studio. Now you're saying, what the frick is Alliant? Well, it's very funny because the more I've gone into depth on Ubisoft, the more I'm like, oh, Ubisoft really does do more than just own Assassin's Creed. They have a lot of weird, weird bets in weird places that I just didn't frickin' realize existed. But okay, what the frick is Alliant? You've never heard of it because I've never heard of it. Alliant is a company that Ubisoft bought. So, he did not build this up, right? So Ubisoft bought this thing. Apparently, it is a free-to-play browser horse breeding sim game. Yeah, I had no idea. Apparently, it's got 60 million users. Never heard of. I mean, I am admittedly not the target demographic, but it is apparently a free-to-play browser horse breeding game with 60 million users, and that's why Ubisoft bought it. Apparently, it was making plenty of bank, and so they picked it up. So he led that for an unspecified amount of time. I didn't really get into the nitty-gritty on the years he was there. He then left Ubisoft. In 2022, he started up his own company, and it was called Unagi. Now, you've obviously never heard of Unagi. Like I said, it's only been around 3 years. What the frick is Unagi? Buckle up, baby. Okay, listen to this. If you didn't like this guy before, you're really not about to, okay? It is a Web3 AI NFT blockchain studio that worked on a fantasy football NFT blockchain Web3 AI game. The studio was only around for 3 years before he left, so no shot that they really produced anything of substance. Apparently, the only thing I saw on their website that they had really done was the sports fantasy football game, right? And as a guy who is deep in IT, look, I'm an NFT believer, okay? I think NFTs can be used successfully. I think I'm an AI believer. I think we're all going to be taken over by AI in the next 5 to 10 years. Hold on to your paycheck dearly while you have it. I'm a blockchain believer, but not in its current state. But this is obviously a conversation for another day. All of these things have value if used correctly, I think. Absolutely. When you see somebody use all of those words at the same time in a business, They are a snake oil salesman, okay? These are words that get investors happy, that say, ooh, these are the buzzwords that I want to invest in because those are the things that are making money right now. And, they're the future. And, I think that these particular industries, specifically like NFT and blockchain, 100%. And Web3 has a lot of it too. And I'm sure AI does, but like there's also a lot of like really successful and obviously very good AI companies out there like ChatGPT. But like these are all dudes who are literally just trying to just use these buzzwords to make money, to get investors in on this deal. And then like who the frick knows if they'll ever actually deliver on it, and I would say 99.9999999% of the time they're not. They are just taking these investors for a ride who don't know any better. And holy frick, that's I don't like this guy already just because of that, right? So he ran that company for 3 years. He then left and earlier this year rejoined Ubisoft to then become the CEO, co-CEO of this major powerhouse subsidiary, literally probably the most important thing for Ubisoft. He's now the co-CEO of it. What does that sound like to you? Sounds like he's probably not very qualified to do this job. So, yes, he had some leadership experience within Ubisoft itself. It was for a nothing entity within the company that was probably just handed to him. They were like, yeah, it's probably a thing it's literally got 60 million established users. Like, as long as you don't completely F it up, we're still going to make money off of it and we'll be happy. And like, even if you do F it up, like, it is what it is, like, it's not our bread and butter. It's not like you're effing over Assassin's Creed. Like, you're just effing over a small, like, free-to-play browser horse breeding game that we bought just because it was an easy source of revenue or whatever. It was a good business deal at the time. He then went on and had actual CEO kind of leadership experience at Unagi, and it was all bullcrap. He didn't ever produce anything of value there, and he used basically the most scummy tactics ever to try and get this thing off the ground by putting all these buzzwords that he probably didn't fully understand and have no intention of actually utilizing in them. So, yeah, it sounds like he left a sinking ship or left for a really good deal because Daddy said, hey, we're making this new big subsidiary and we want the Gelmonts to still be in power. And hey, you know what would allow that to happen? If I put you in charge of it. And, I think that's easily what freaking happened. It's like not even close. Like when I look and I compare Charlie, Eve's son, to Christoph, who we had just referenced as like the dude who was in charge of like all of Ubisoft North America and ran Montreal and all that other bullcrap. These two are like on completely separate levels of experience in leadership and success. Like it's like not even close. Totally understand Christoph. And what I would see here is Christoph is almost like basically going to be running the entire company, and Charlie is just going to kind of be there and like take credit for what Christoph is doing so he can eventually take over Ubisoft proper when Daddy retires. That's what I see. That's what I see is the likelihood of this happening. So anyways, moving on, that was actually addressed. Vanity Fair, specifically, I believe was the outlet that addressed them on a earnings call and said, hey, I think this might be a nepotism hire. I think you guys may have just kind of hired this guy because he's your son. And Charlie piped up and he said, hey, I want to actually talk about this. Let me address this, okay? Quote, but my appointment isn't only about family ties. It's about what Ubisoft needs at this moment. I've spent the last decade building experience both inside and outside Ubisoft, leading teams, managing brands, and navigating change in a fast-moving industry. I also made the conscious choice to step away when it made sense, to get a freaking better job at a massive company, to learn and grow elsewhere. What matters now is not my name. It's the work ahead. Ubisoft is at a pivotal moment. What's expected of me is to help push the company forward by bringing energy, focus, and relying on incredible expertise that already exists across teams. I see myself as someone here to contribute, support, and help create the right conditions that are in place for everyone to do their best work. Yeah, I mean, I think you just look at the facts here, and like that's just complete and utter bullcrap. Obviously, this guy doesn't have anywhere near the same expertise or leadership or experience that the other dude who does, Christoph, does. There were likely 110 other better picks in the organization themselves, claiming that he went and like built up a bunch of experience outside of Ubisoft is, I mean, irrelevant. One, irrelevant, and two, like he clearly didn't have very much success outside of it, and immediately abandoned it when he likely was told, "Oh, we have a CEO position open for you in this really good cushy place where you really can't F it up. Like, we are putting the biggest tentpole franchises under one roof. Like, as long as you just keep doing what we're doing, like, you really shouldn't have that much of an issue. And we're going to be giving you another dude who's just going to be freaking basically running the show alongside you. What the frick is there not to like?" And I kind of happen to agree. Like, if I was given that kind of an insane proposition, I would probably take it. But this comes shortly after, they tried to fight for control, and they made a really big sticking point to investors, like I said earlier, that they were like, hey, we really want the Gilmont family to maintain control, and if you don't like it, we really don't want your money. And here we are. We have a Gilmont in control. So that's an interesting proposition. So this maintains that. This is also, like shortly after, like the company is continuing to fall apart under the Gilmont's leadership. We just had, this was something that I decided not to talk about last episode because I was like, well, we have the big Xbox layoff story, but 3 of their previous executives were found guilty for sexual and psychological harassment, which is cool. And that was like a systematic issue that they had been dealing with for a really long time. And then like they even came out and were like, oh no, we are French, and that's not a French accent at all, bro. Okay, let me get into the French mindset. We address the I'm still kind of off. I'm just gonna stop. But they were like, yeah, dude, we had okay. We addressed the situation, and people were like, no, they didn't. They just kind of shuffled around all the leadership that there were problems with. Yeah, this is a company that's clearly been faltering under the Gilmont leadership. They've kind of stuck to their guns for the past 2 decades, and people are sick of it. Sales are down. The model that they've been using is this big open world collectathon is clearly not working as well as it used to. Whatever the case is, the Gilmonts have kind of moved this company into the ground, and continuing to be so stubborn and be like, hey, we're not going to give up our power. Look, I get it, but like, bro, like clearly you guys are not the best dudes for the frickin' job. Like you've clearly made mistakes. You clearly need to back the frick off and to double down on like, yeah, we're going to put a really pretty green, which by the way, I saw a picture of this guy when looking at his website for his other studio. And I was like, Unagi. And dude, this guy is young as frick. Like I saw a picture of him. I was like, what the frick? This guy's like maybe 28. Like I don't know, but like he's not 28. He's probably in his 30s though. He's easily in his 30s, and it's like, what the frick? This guy has like hardly any life experience. Like what the frick to be a CEO of a major corporation? That's insane. I just see this as like another long line of like, we are the Gilmonts and we do whatever we want. And that's a much better French accent. Where was that 10 minutes ago? Frick. Embarrassing. But anyway, I think it is very important to understand who's in charge of this, though. Ubisoft is easily one of the biggest publishers with some of the biggest IP in video games of all time. Of all time and currently, if we really want to be universal to the statement. But, it's important to know who's in charge. It's important to know their background. It's important to know that, the situation within Ubisoft, because it continues to look like it is in a really bad place and in a lot of turmoil. And, Tencent clearly threw him a line and gave him, over $1 billion in funding to kind of get a piece of this, subsidiary pie. And I can't imagine that it will continue to do well if the same people who have made all these horrible decisions over the past 20 years are continuing to hand the reins over to people who probably aren't very qualified and will probably just continue to make the same decisions because they are also Guillemets. And they've been raised by Guillemets. And there's nothing to show me that he is capable of doing anything other than what the Guillemets have already been doing, because I don't think he's experienced enough to have, the knowledge to make better decisions. And he hasn't shown that he can do that in a different way than his dad did. So I would assume he's going to be taking commands from his dad. That's kind of what it sounds like to me. It's kind of what it looks like to me. And, like I said earlier, I am not the sins of the father or the sins of the son kind of guy. But I do believe that, you do need an experienced person in a role that's this important. And this is not a guy who's experienced. And again, it's a co-role. So, and nobody seems to be talking about that. They're really focusing in on, the fact that this is a nepo hire. And the fact that he kind of came out and was like, I promise I'm not a nepo baby. And it's like, okay, one, everyone who's a nepo baby says they're not a nepo baby. And two, you totally are a nepo baby. So that's kind of what the headlines are. But I do think it is genuinely important to know this guy is now in charge of some of the biggest IP in video games. And I don't think he's going to be making a lot of the decisions. I think he's going to be a proxy for his dad. And, that is what it is. But, I think that's probably a bad thing, because this studio this entire publisher has been really struggling as of the last few years. So you really don't want to see that. But yeah, I think that's my general takeaways from the entire situation here. All right, enough for the news. Slow news week, but still some interesting stories there. Krafton kind of saved me a little bit. But anyway, on to impressions. This week's impressions, or this episode's impressions, I don't want to say interesting because I feel like that's just a catchphrase at this point and I overuse the word. But it is something. We have a very No More Heroes heavy impression segment. I played No More Heroes 1 a couple of episodes ago, and I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed just the craziness of it, the balls to the walls, action, the pacing, not the pacing. Pacing was definitely off. But just in general, the game resonated with me. We'll say that. And I said, I can't, honestly, for a game that came out over a decade ago, I genuinely cannot wait to get back into No More Heroes 2. And just so happened that No More Heroes 3 was actually a free game on PlayStation Plus Extra, and No More Heroes 2 was on sale for the Summer Games sale on Steam. You can get it on Switch as well, but I just opted for the Steam Deck version to play it on my Steam Deck at the time. But anyways, so essentially I had access to both No More Heroes 2 and 3. Or for cheap or free, one of the two. So I decided, hey, I actually really enjoyed No More Heroes 1 enough. I'm going to just jump right into 2. I really, really enjoy it because another proponent of that decision was you never know when something is going to be taken off of your PlayStation Plus Extra service. So if you have if you have the mood, if the mood hits you to play a game that's on that service, you might as well do it, because you may not have access to it for free forever. So I just decided, hey, let's get into it. Let's knock these games out. I actually really want to play them. And so I started playing 2, and dang, dude. Like, this game is honestly better than the original in almost every way. I was really surprised by this because probably you got the impression if you listened to my last episode where I talked about No More Heroes 1 was like, I really don't trust Grasshopper at all. Like, I think a lot of their games are not very good. I've played several of them, and I'm like, the vast majority of them are pretty mediocre, not very well designed, not very well put together, and I'm really surprised they have such a strong fan base. And it's very much like a cult fan base, I would say. It's not like a huge one, but it is a cult fan base for sure. And played No More Heroes 1, and I was like, oh no, dude, I actually really like this game. Like, it actually is a really cool time, and I really enjoy it. The rule of cool definitely kind of carries that game, and I still had issues with it. The pacing was definitely off. There was, some really horrific pacing in it, to be quite frank, that really just tried to elongate the game's runtime. But like in this one, a lot of those issues are fixed. In fact, almost all of them. I have very few complaints about No More Heroes 2. Hitting off, the game picks up years after the first game, and Travis, his Blockbuster like employee friend, of essentially the equivalent of Blockbuster in this universe, is murdered. And he must avenge his friend. This is, of course, like kind of a joke motivation, because like this is a very minor character that you really don't interact with in any significant way throughout the series. So it's like supposed to be kind of funny that like all of a sudden Travis is like kind of really pissed off that like his friend is dead, or like this guy that like the player doesn't really know or think is very important at all is dead. But now, instead of fighting the first 10 ranks, you have to fight 50. Which are like, Henry, that sounds like a really long game, and I don't want to touch that. Obviously, that's like a joke. You don't actually fight 50 ranks. I think there's still like 10 boss fights. It's not 50 at all. You jump like freaking 30 ranks at one point, within one boss fight. So like, it's just a goofy little premise, and that's kind of part of what I love about it. Is like the story is still just as goofy, but in a way I enjoyed a lot more. Since I found the first ending of the game to be really random and not a conclusion that I really wanted for a story and a concept that I found really cool. Like I really do find the concept and like the story itself, just like the conceit of No More Heroes, to be a great motivation, trying to work your way up this leaderboard of this cool assassins ranking. And like, I think that this game is way better when it tries to focus on being cool rather than being funny. And like No More Heroes 1 and 2 definitely both have a lot of funny moments in them that are just like weird and wacky, but like we'll say like No More Heroes 1 was like an 11 on the wacky scale. This game is more like a 7, like it's really tuned down a lot. It's still definitely wacky and crazy, but like it really does try to dial into those like cool moments a lot more. Like Travis has a lot more moments that I really thought were interesting, where he's like, I don't know if I really love the idea of killing all these guys. Like, like I'm a warrior, and like I want to kind of respect the people that I'm fighting, and like Sylvia will come in and be like, F you, like this is a freaking business. Like, and I don't give a frick about your feelings. Like I thought that dynamic was really cool, and seeing how it, kind of evolved over the course of the game was really interesting. But like the budget here has clearly gone up. There's more, varied areas. There's more varied bosses. There's better cutscenes, I felt, better music. There's some really cool tracks in this game. And even the combat has been significantly improved. Like basically every complaint I had about the original has been addressed. My main complaint about the first game was like the open world elements and how much they sucked. And they really surprised me. I don't think I've ever seen a developer do this, or I can't remember the last time I've seen a developer do this, but they were like, okay, clearly the whole open world element thing padding with side missions and stuff. Didn't work. Just remove it. And I was like, what the frick? If anything, I thought that they were going to double down on it and they were going to try and fix the open world and be like, okay, well, we'll just redesign the open world. We'll try to put more stuff in it. We'll try to like make sure that like the player has something to do in it and they're varied things. And I was like, don't do that. I don't trust this developer to do that. But like they've already put all the effort into making an open world. There is no way they're just going to toss it away. Bro, they frickin' just toss it. They just are like, F this open world thing. It clearly didn't work, and we're not going to put any more effort into it. And I was just like, that is the most amazing decision you could have possibly made, and I am so grateful that you did that. So, like, there is no more horrific, like, traversal in this environment. There is no more, like, grinding side missions. I mean, you can, but it's, like... In the first game, it was required. It was like, if you don't do these side missions, you cannot progress. In this, it's like, no, dude, you can go straight to the next side mission if you want. But if you want to do side missions, you'll just be able to buy, like, weapon upgrades and stuff. And it's like, okay, cool. And so I frickin' just did that. So the monotonous grinding for money to advance is completely gone. The side missions have now moved from, like, these, like, almost like middle fingers to the player, which I get was like a joke, but still, like you were like picking up trash and stuff, to like actual mini games, like 8-bit style, like they completely change all the mechanics of the game and are just like, these are like actual mini games that you can actually kind of get into. And I grinded them out for a little bit and like just like tried to get all the upgrades in the game, and it, you know, like I didn't hate it. Like, I really didn't enjoy doing the side missions in No More Heroes 1. It was very much like a labor of love to get to the actual good parts of the game. But, like, in No More Heroes 2, I was like, no, like, this is okay. Like, this is definitely still not great, but, like, it's also not required of me. So, like, it is what it is. And I wanted the good upgrades and stuff, so I decided to put the time in to earn them, which I very much appreciated. All that being said, the game is still a Grasshopper Manufacturer game by Suda51, so there is still jank, but it is all sorts of stuff that I really didn't, like, mind. Like, it's like, it was like, oh, okay. Like, okay, I wrote a few of them down. So you spend a buttload of money early on in the game to, like, upgrade all your weapons, right? Which you have a handful of different weapon variants that all kind of have different, like, one of them's like, this is your fast weapon, this is your, like, heavy weapon, so on and so forth. But, like, the cost a lot of money, and you have to grind out the missions, which I did, to, like, get that money. And then, like, halfway through the game, they just give you the best weapon fully upgraded in the game. Arguably, the best weapon in the game fully upgraded for free. Like, just for progression. And I'm like, oh, why the frick did I do that? Why the frick did I ever need to invest in any of these particular weapons? Because I was just going to get a game-changing weapon, like, halfway through the game that I was never going to need to upgrade anyway. So, like, what the frick was the point? Like, 2/3 of the way of the game, there's, like, a motorcycle segment with no enemies and no fail state. And you just, like, boost along an empty highway for, like, 5 minutes, which is just frickin', like, what the frick are we doing here? Pacing is a little bit off towards the last couple of missions. Like, just like in the first game, you kind of have like a runway to like the boss where you fight up like a bunch of minions. And like early on in the game, it's really quick and snappy, and you like pretty much immediately get to the boss pretty quick, like within like freaking 5-10 minutes. And then like towards the end of the game, like they start really throwing some large waves of enemies at you comparative to early missions. And it's like, okay, I guess I can put up with this for like 3 missions, but like the pacing definitely seemed a little wacky in that regard. Combat moves. Combat was not like insanely well designed here. While I do think it was improved and like it's a lot snappier and fun, more fun to just fight things. Like there's an entire like the move sets have now been kind of chipped in half. So like half of your buttons are like sword attacks and half of them are like kicking and punching. And all kicking and punching it doesn't do any damage. It just stuns enemies. It builds up a stun. And then if you completely stun an enemy, then you can use like your wrestling moves on them, which is like a super move basically. And it's like, I don't know why I would need to do that because I'm not doing any damage to them. And like you don't actually stun the enemy until you've actually like fully stunned them. But within your regular move sets of like your sword not only are you damaging the enemy, but you're like stun locking them too. So it's like, why the frick would I ever use kicking and punching? It's just objectively more efficient to use just my sword attacks 100% of the time. So like, there is jank. It's not a 100% super well designed, well thought out game, but like it is much better than I consider the first game to be. It actually seems like they tried something new here, and you can vary up your combat if you chose to. Just I don't see the need why you would ever need to. Game's pacing is like tuned up to 11 without these missions, without these long like kind of runways to the bosses anymore. Like you are pretty much like immediately snapping into each boss fight, and like these boss fights are all cool. Like they are the highlights of the game, and like you want to get into the next one so fast. I mean, like you go from like a mech fight to like a samurai motorcycle brawl to like a cosmonaut that's like calling down like death beams from outer space. Like it's like all these boss fights are freaking rad, and like the game even knows it's trying to pace itself well, because like halfway through the game it takes a break, and it's like, okay, well, you're no longer playing as Travis, you're playing as like 3 different other characters, and not only are you playing as 3 different other characters with like different combat styles, but like you're fighting like multiple bosses with them. Each one of them has like a boss you fight with, and I'm like, oh frick, this is really this is really well thought out and really well paced, and like this is amazing. Like I can't believe that this is so much better than what I'm used to. Combat feels smoother to me. Like the original, it felt like it was slower because it was trying to focus on like Wii controls, because it was originally a Wii exclusive, and like meant you had to like physically move your arm up and down to like actually get a slash off. But now that it seemed like it's like kind of given up on that a little bit, and it's like, okay, we're just cool with you just kind of flicking it a little bit, I guess, and your movements are a lot flashier and faster in that case, and therefore like combat is a lot faster too. Overall, I had a blast with this game. Like it made me such a huge fan of No More Heroes. It made me excited to play No More Heroes 3, and like I highly recommend it if you're just looking for like a crazy balls to the walls, like crazy like masterpiece of a game that's like just filled with blood, sex, and gore. Like that's all it is, and like that's all it needs to be. It just needs to be cool, right? And like that's what this game frickin' is. But what it did make me think is like, what the frick happened to Grasshopper Manufacturer? Like this is a game that is taking a base of a game that was already good, making it great, and like learning from its mistakes. Like what this shows me is this is a studio that can take feedback, learn from its mistakes, create a good combat system, like have some really creative ideas that are always like going to be pushing the game. And like none of the rest of the games that the studio has ever made have done that. Like, what the frick? Like, it's kind of crazy that all of the games that they've made after this have, not great fun combat or mechanics, or just seem amateurly made, or they're not even as crazy as this game. Like, I think No More Heroes is easily like the craziest this game, like the games that Grasshopper Manufacturer have gotten. And like, what the frick? Like, what the frick happened? And, like I said, I've played Lollipop Chainsaw, I've played Shadows of the Danged, I've played a few of others, like Suda51's games, and, like, none of them have come close to the fun that I've had playing No More Heroes 2. And, like I started looking ahead at No More Heroes 3, which I guess we're jumping into, and the reviews for it were really low comparative to 1 and 2, No More Heroes 1 and 2. And I was like, I know that everything in between No More Heroes 2 and No More Heroes 3 was not as good. What am I about to walk into? And, dang. No More Heroes 3 is one of the biggest and most incredible disappointments I have ever seen, especially for a game that took 11 years to cook up. This was obviously there was a big gap between No More Heroes 2 and 3. Not only was there a big gap, but they made another game in No More Heroes that seemed a bit off, and I'm going to tell you why. So they made Travis Strikes Again. Travis Strikes Again was released prior to No More Heroes 3, and it was not anything like No More Heroes 1, 2, or 3 in terms of its gameplay. It is an isometric, like, beat-em-up of sorts. It's not good. It's really not good. In fact, I was taken aback by how low budget this game was in comparison, and like the models looked really bad, and like the design seemed amateurish. Like this felt like this was like the studio's first game. And it was like, well, we just put out this game, and I'm going to tell you what I think happened here. So when you start up the game, Travis is very apparently into Unreal Engine 4. And I mean that literally. Like, he is like, yo, I love Unreal Engine 4. Not only does he say that directly to the player, but he also is wearing an Unreal Engine 4 logo shirt. And the collectibles in the game are Unreal Engine 4 logo collectibles. Can you tell that maybe they really like Unreal Engine 4? And what this really screams to me is they had just decided to learn Unreal Engine 4. And like this was probably their first project they were doing in Unreal Engine 4. And this was like well, before we work on our big No More Heroes 3 return to form project, let's get to kind of be a little bit more familiar with Unreal Engine 4. And we'll make kind of a side-off project, like a one-off side project that is like kind of getting our feet wet within the engine of Unreal Engine 4. And so like that is what it screamed to me was happening. I tried to play this game for like 2 to 3 hours, and I was like, I'm not having fun with this at all, and I put the game down. Like I said, this feels like this is their first game they ever frickin' made. And like it's amateur hour on display 100% of the time. But I was like, you know what? We're going to bury that thought deep down in the ground, and we're going to let it just sit there for a while, okay? Because maybe what happened is they learned from this game, and they were able to take everything that they learned from Travis Strikes Again, and they were able to build on it and do much better with No More Heroes 3. And because No More Heroes 3 is like the numbered title, they probably had a larger budget for that game. And that's going to be the game that game's going to take off, and it's going to be really fun. It's going to be just like No More Heroes 2, and I'm going to have just as good a time with it. That did not happen, unfortunately. So I started up 3 with the expectation, this is going to be turned around, and a continuation of their most popular IP. And I was greeted with the same looking amateur models that looked like they were from a game 20 years ago. That, again, somebody who didn't know what the frick they were trying to design a model looked like. Like, Travis looks kind of gross looking in this game, to be quite frickin' honest. Animations that looked unfinished or, like, awkward. Like, Travis walking is, like, there are moments where, like, you're forced to, like, walk slowly down a hallway to, like, a boss room or something. And, like, it looks like he has a stick shoved up his butt or something. You are forced to do like cleaning toilet mini games, which is like I'm not upset with, because I know that sounds horrible, but like or not fun, but like that is a kind of running joke in No More Heroes, is like you do like menial chores as part of games, like mini games. So like it's not particularly too far out of the realm of what I'm used to with the series. But like he'll like when he comes out and he's like successful, he'll be like Yahoo, and he'll like raise his hand up, and it looks like he looks so awkward He looks so weird. It's like, what the frick? Like, you can't even do like a successful pose, like a victory pose. Well, what the frick? An open world. So they have now gone back to using the open world after they abandoned it in No More Heroes 2, and no one complained. In fact, I praise them for that decision. They went back to the open world, which is surprisingly even more barren and worse designed than the first game over a decade ago. The combat engine felt slower and clunkier. Bosses are boring and like poorly designed. I mean, some of the bosses look like there's no way Suda51 or whoever designed the bosses in the first game designed these bosses too. There is no way. They are boring looking. They look like I don't even know, dude. It's like if an AI generator said, "Give me an anime alien." You'd probably get something like this. It is like very bare bones, very not creative. Oh, I guess I haven't gotten into the story yet, but aliens invade. Aliens invade. I'll get to it in a second, but the bosses are all aliens. They're no longer assassins. They're all aliens. So they're all poorly designed. Enemies in general are just the same. You have to fight a bunch of bullcrap enemies in this game and grind out missions again, like in the first game. And all the enemies are boring as frick. And then I didn't like the story. The story didn't grab me at all. The story grabbed me and resonated with me in 1 and 2, and I did not enjoy it at all in this game. Everything was a letdown here. Like, everything. From a guy who literally considered himself a big No More Heroes fan, like 5 minutes before he played this game. You know, like, I cannot express how I was so disappointed that, like, this failed to meet any expectation I had for it. Let's break it down. The game opens on a surprisingly well-animated cutscene that sets up the game's story about Fu, an alien, little cute alien fuzzball named Fu, and Damon, who's a boy who raises the cute little alien, and it's kind of E.T. basically. The alien goes off back to his homeworld, and he comes back, and he wants to take over the world. He's basically become a huge a-hole and like wants to take over the whole world. I find this concept funny. Like, what if E.T. ended up growing up to be like an a-hole and like came back and wanted to destroy the earth and like take over? I think that's funny. Like, I do. Does it work for a No More Heroes story? I don't really think so within the context of the series. But, you know, it is what it is. There are weirdly a lot of animated cutscenes in this game that I recognize some of the animation styles as like pretty successful or well-known animation studios in Japan. And I'm like, oh, well, clearly this game had the budget to put into some pretty well-done cutscenes. So like it's odd that the rest of the game feels so low budget. So when these guys come back in, they're like, we're taking over the world. Travis, of course, gets drawn back in, and he has to fight his way up the galactic assassin charts because it just so happens all these people that are working with the alien Fu to take over the world are also galactic assassins. Or I don't even think they're known as assassins. I think they're just tough aliens, and you have to just fight them all. So it really is no longer like earning your way up this like leaderboard. It is now just you're fighting 10 bosses, and this is the order you have to do it in, which, again, is like kind of taking away the magic of that concept that I really kind of resonated with, and I really wasn't super happy with that. The highlight of the previous game with the bosses, this game, enemies did not grab me in the same way they did in 1 and 2. Designs look like somebody threw up all over a page and are typically really oversimplistic. There's like one that's just like a shiny robot. Like, that's pretty much it. Plus, there's like no cool factor to any of these guys. They're just like, one guy's like, I have a magnet power. I'm like, okay, I just listed off a few of the bosses from 2 that were, you know, a mech fight, which there admittedly is one of those in this game. it opens with a mech fight, but like it's still like a not very cool fight in general, comparative to what I had seen in previous games. You know, a cosmonaut calling down, you know, death beams from space and stuff like that. It's like in a samurai motorcycle battle, like all of those just sound cool conceptually. And then when they tell me, oh, like he's like a robot with like magnetic powers, bro, comparative to what I just said, there is no way you even come close to putting that in the same level of cool factor that you had in the previous game. Like, there's no way. So, like, all boss fights, which were the highlights of what I was looking forward to in No More Heroes 1 and 2, were just totally not there at all. The tone of this game is way more zany and wacky. And, like, look, I even said in my previous synopsis of 2, 1 and 2 both have wacky options. If I said, like, 1 was an 11 on the wacky scale, 2 was like a 7, dude, 3 is like a 21. Like, this is a comedic game. It in no way wants to try to be serious. It in no way wants to try to be cool anymore. It is really just trying to be freaking zany and wacky like 90% of the time. And I really didn't love that tone. They literally reference in the game, I think they may actually reference it in specifically Travis Strikes Again, which I kind of just consider that pretty much a part of this game at this point because they're so similar in a lot of ways. But they reference Travis as the Deadpool of video games, which I think they lean into a little too hard here with little success, in my opinion. He basically, is very regularly referencing the player, breaking the fourth wall, doing like crazy, wacky stuff that you'd see Deadpool kind of doing. Jokes every once in a while here work fine, but like all the time, not so much. Most of the jokes in this game are not funny to me. I definitely got like a grin or a smirk or a giggle or two out of one or two of them, but it was so rare, and the game basically completely throws its tone under the bus that I just did not see it as worth it at all. Side characters here. I think there's a lot of recurring side characters in 1 and 2 that are really cool, and they come back here too, but they are little to be seen. They're hardly in the game at all. Honestly, there is a character that they introduced in this game that is a cameo from another one of Suda51's games that gets more screen time than pretty much all of the other side characters combined. In Travis Strikes Again, they introduced 2 characters that are brought back in this game, and I basically had no idea who they freaking were. I think his name was like Batman or something, because he's a dude who like fights people with baseball bats, and like his daughter, and like they are somehow in this game, but like not at all at the same time. But like there's a character that's introduced from one of Suda51's games that like I think the vast majority of players of this are not going to know or recognize. I know I didn't. It's not explained where he's from. It's just assumed that every player playing the game is going to know who the frick it is. One of Suda51's big original games, which I learned when I went to see him at MomoCon, was a visual novel. It was a visual novel. You can still pick it up on Steam now if you wanted to. It was considered very popular in Japan, but not in America. So, you know, like, this is the protagonist from that visual novel that I don't think 99% of the players playing this game are going to even have heard of, yet alone played. So, you know, he gets a lot of screen time. Admittedly, not that much, but like still more than most of the recurring side characters like Henry, who's Travis's brother. They actually introduced an entirely new brother into this game for some freaking reason, and like never really touch on Henry at all, which is a recurring character from 1 and 2. After surprisingly removing the open world elements and grinding elements from 2, they for some reason revert back to the side mission and currency grinds between boss missions. So now not only do you have to get the currency again, so you have to have a certain amount of money to hand over, but you also have to do some like missions where you fight like minor characters or, you know, minor enemies. You have to do 3 of them between every single boss fight, every single one. They have removed the build up to bosses. So like there used to be like a walking segment where you kind of beat up enemies or minions going to the boss fight. That's completely removed. You go straight to the boss fight now. You know, but you're fighting the same 3 minions over and over and over again in every single one of these like mini side missions you're doing, and it gets old real freaking fast. Enemy variants are all introduced early, and so you'll fight the same 3 or 4 each mission, and it's never fun. And like I was always hoping the boss fights would try and like make up for this, and like I said, they never really did. You have to travel in the open world, which is incredibly barren and amateurish looking from beginning to end, and you're basically just doing all of this to have like a really bad payoff of these mediocre bosses. Combat is flashy, but not too different from the previous titles. It feels slowed down, which I was not a big fan of. I prefer flashy, smooth, quick combat rather than like clunky, slow combat. That's just a personal preference, I suppose. But, it felt snappier than 1, but slower than 2 for sure. It's been expanded a bit, but in odd ways that I don't think mesh well with the game's mechanics. They give you like a handful of like special abilities that you can use at any time. So like a telepathic shove or a health draining like area of effect move, which I just don't think makes sense within the realm of mechanics of No More Heroes. I wouldn't say it's a big improvement given that it's, 10 years, between installments. You'd think that there would be a lot more they could add here. I think the combat was specifically slowed down to show off the flashier animations. The problem with this is like it's like Assassin's Creed. If you played an Assassin's Creed game, you know that you get locked into anime, at least in earlier Assassin's Creed game. I admittedly haven't played one of the new ones in a while, but like it was very much trying to emphasize style over substance, and so it wanted to make sure that you would follow through on all the animations that you were prompting the game to, go through. So like if you press a button to attack, you were cemented into doing that attack. Like you couldn't get out of it. And in this game, it's very similar. But with the game trying to beat the frick out of you in like mid combo, it means you can't dodge during a combo. So you're just going to have to eat hits, which is really frustrating, especially with some encounters. There's one boss that's just like, it has just a one-hit kill move. That it just spams a one-hit kill move over and over and over and over and over again. And I died like freaking 10 times to it because I was trying to attack it and it would freaking spam its one-hit kill move and hit me in the middle of a combo that I couldn't get out of or dodge. So it was like, what the frick? And it ends up being very frustrating and very, again, amateurish. Like you just don't see many fighting games now that don't give you the ability to dodge and like cancel your combo mid-combo. Story ends up leading to a much less satisfying conclusion, and even like a super unsatisfying final boss that sets up like a sequel, which, characters that were mentioned throughout the game are hardly focused on. Like the side characters, they kind of come in at the very last second for this game, but like they don't really do anything. And like what it seems to be is this game was, even early on in the game, they kind of allude to, look, we're back, like we're gonna make more games, and like this game alludes to like there's another game coming, like we're trying to make another game here. Like there's a reason you didn't see Henry. It's because he's off doing this thing. Like we alluded to like Travis having kids, like here are his kids. We want this to be like a franchise again, and I don't think that's freaking happening. Like this game did not do well. I cannot imagine. It feels a little like ridiculous, kind of throwing like, oh yeah, we're gonna make another sequel to this. I don't think so. Like I think this game was like, you needed to try harder if you wanted this game to be a franchise. You cannot drop the ball in so many horrific ways for that to happen. There's a few funny or interesting ideas buried in this game. Okay, like at one point you have like the game turns into a turn. One of the bosses starts off as like a turn-based RPG fight, and you have to like battle your own, item select menu and stuff like that in order to, kind of progress the fight, which is funny. Like meeting Mike throughout the game focuses on like clearly one of Suda51's favorite directors in Japan. And they kind of bring that to the forefront, and they're like, oh, well, here's actually the guy. Like, they get him to cameo in the game, which I think is, like, at least interesting at the very least. And, like, incorporating that one visual novel character is certainly an interesting idea, but, like, none of these are really worth the slog for the rest of the game. And, like, they're not what I came to this game for at all. I came for the cool. And the cool is not here. I stuck through the game because I really loved No More Heroes 1 and 2, but was really disappointed by 3 in like a really, really bad way. And I am clearly not the only one, because I checked the trophy percentages on this game, and only 9% of players actually beat the game. Now, I want to kind of address that a little bit here. A really good trophy completion percentage is like 33%. If 1 in 3% or if 1 in 3 players beat your game, you actually did a really good job. It's really rare for people to actually beat the games they play. So like, you're like, okay, well, 33% is really good. Well, then like 9% can't be like that bad. It's only like 1 in 3 of 1 in 3, like what's wrong with that? 9%, from what I've seen, if you are dipping into single digit percentages for your completion, you effed up. Like a good percentage completion is like I said, about in the 30s, 30%, low 30s. An okay percentage completion, we're thinking like probably like high teens, like really high teens is like, you're like, okay, that's probably where like most games kind of filter out, about 18% of players probably finish the game. Something like that. We're down into 9% here, people. Not only that, but like, I think it was down into like 17% of players did not get through chapter 3. So like way majority of the players dip on this game super early. Really early. Basically, the game is like, hey, why don't you go out into the open world and start doing a bunch of side missions that are freaking horrible? And people were like, nah, bro, I ain't about it. I got better things to do. And they ditched the game. And this is, I got access to it on PlayStation Extra, but most people probably paid money for this game. So it's probably like a majority of players who paid $60 for this game, who are likely hardcore fans of No More Heroes, and even they are like, F this game, I don't want anything to do with it, I'm not even going to finish it. What? That is mind-blowing to me, that the community bailed on it so bad. 9% of players. That's crazy. That is crazy. All in all, I don't think we're getting a 4. I think this is likely the death knell for this series, unless Suda51 is like, I can do better, I really know what I'm doing, and I don't trust Suda51. Like, I don't think Grasshopper can get a freaking win. And like, I was coming off of 2, and I was like, yo, Romeo is a Dead Man, which, if we've talked on this show about before, is Suda51's next big game that they showed off at Summer Games Fest this year. I was like, yo, Romeo is a Dead Man, bro. That game could be freaking cool, because like No More Heroes 2 is really good. I was really high on the studio after 2. Their most recent game is No More Heroes 3, and it is so bad. It is so bad. I cannot remain excited. Like, I have gone back from like being like, oh yeah, I think Grasshopper like has some interesting ideas, but they really can't execute on them well, to No More Heroes 2 making me be like, yo, this studio has potential to do something really cool. To No More Heroes 3 being like, this studio is in the dumpster. Like, it really knocked me down that far. That far. And, I really just, it's like, well, we'll always have Paris. That classic line, It's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all. I'm at least glad I got to love No More Heroes 1 and 2. I am upset that 3 had to be such a fall from grace, and it didn't meet my expectations. I couldn't have had more of what I loved so much, but I am glad I got to love. The moments I had loving No More Heroes are worth the heartbreak that No More Heroes 3 gave me, I think is my final takeaway from that. I think very profound. Tied that into a very thought-provoking quote that I finally feel like, thanks to No More Heroes, I fully understand it. But anyway, that's my impressions, unfortunately. I also have been playing a little bit of Donkey Kong Bonanza. Should have led with that, because people probably care about that. Only played a couple of hours of it so far. I really don't want to talk about it too much. I mean, I'll have it beat by the next episode, and I'll definitely be getting into it then when, in 2 weeks, nobody gives a frick about it anymore, because that's how the schedule works. But anyway, so far I'm enjoying it, though. Just the polish around it. It's clearly made by the Odyssey team. It's, not even close. I don't know why Nintendo has to be so cagey about that information. But, yeah, it's totally made by the frickin' Odyssey team. But, I'm really looking forward to delving into that, collecting some bananas, and enjoying a good platformer, because I am the platformer king, as I often like to say. So very much looking forward to it, and you know what? I'm very much looking forward to seeing you next time on the Plug and Play podcast. Friends, thank you so much for sticking the end with me. If you are still here, I really do appreciate it, friend. Genuinely enjoy the conversation. Even if, it's not a back and forth, to me, you're listening, I'm talking. I mean, that's a conversation in a way, kind of. But I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to have my voice heard, and to have the opportunity to talk about the things that I really do care about and love. And I hope you do too. Hope you're getting something out of this as well. I hope I give you something to get out of it at least. And you know what? I hope you play some good video games. I hope you have a good couple of weeks until we see each other again, or hear each other again. And I'll see you then, sir, or madam. I'm not here to discriminate. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.